And it's essentially what you were talking about, the failure to industrialize. And by that, we're talking about the EU, who has decided we're going to rewrite the rules. And this story comes from The Economist. And it's titled, How EU Do-Goodry Risk Harming African Small Farmers. New forest mapping rules may shut African crops out of the European market. Sacks of coffee are piled up high in an Ethiopian warehouse, dwarfing the workers who scurry between them. Our farmers' lives are dependent on this coffee, says Dijene Dadi Dika, the general manager of the Oromo Coffee Farmers Cooperative Union, which have more than 500,000 member farms. He is worried about a new EU deforestation regulation, which requires that every bean sold in Europe be traced to the field it came from. It costs the co-op about $4 to geolocate each farm, and he wonders who will pay. With the stroke of a pen, the EU is rewriting trading practices the world over. It is bringing cocoa, coffee, rubber, soya, palm oil, wood, and cattle products into Europe to prove that these commodities did not come from land which was deforested after 2020. So what do you think will be the impact of such a new rule? Can you hear me?
Okay, so, my view on this particular topic is a bit contrarian.
Okay.
And I'll explain in two parts. Number one, obviously, in theory, I support what the premise is all about, right?
Okay.
The premise is, of course, the issue of deforestation, which, of course, is a major crisis globally and particularly in Africa as well. Because in Africa, we have the remaining potential savior of the earth, right? We still have dense forest, dense growth, and obviously we need that for the carbon capture to sustain the world as we know it.
Okay.
So I can see the incentive to come up with these mechanisms to discourage the deforestation, the mass cutting down of these trees. So the article is posing the premise that, on the other hand, while that in fact is good, it has other consequences as well. It has other costs. So what is the solution? So they're presenting it as if it's a choice. We either ignore putting any restrictions because we don't want African farmers to suffer. So let the deforestation essentially continue, which is, of course, a very absurd argument. Even by the standards of the economists, it's preposterous. We can't have that, number one. And then number two, I actually see it as an opportunity. First of all, I must say, even though the article sounds like sort of an alarmist tone, this proposal is unenforceable. It's completely unenforceable. They don't have the resources to enforce it. They're not going to say, okay, let's see whether those, first of all, how do you know the borders of those farms, right? Because many of them are small-scale producers, not large plantations. So are you saying these small farms that are adjoining, one each next to the other, are going to have to invest into unique geo-mapping devices? That to me is completely preposterous. I don't see how you enforce that.
Okay.
It sounds like it's good on paper, but it's going to be very difficult to enforce. But that was not my main point. My main point is that this is finally assuming it is enforceable going forward.
Okay.
It's actually going to compel African countries to stop exporting those huge bags, those huge sacks packed with cocoa, packed with coffee, packed with soya beans, packed with so-called unprocessed agricultural commodities,
For next to
right?
nothing.
That's what they're doing now with the agricultural products. That's what they're doing now with the minerals that come from the earth. So now is an opportunity to start manufacturing. So export the cocoa as nicely packaged chocolates,
Chocolates. Yeah.
right?
Mhm.
Why are they buying it in sacks in the first place? They're buying it in sacks because they want to maximize the value once they put it through their factories. They're not doing anything magical to the coffee or the cocoa. They're just processing and then repackaging it. And that is why they insist on buying it in these huge sacks. And if you ban the sacks, they'll find other ways of containers to ship it. So it seems to me that this is an opportunity for you to actually say, if you really want to help us, we don't need geomapping. We don't need any funds to enforce the deforestation. We can do it by producing and then converting this into value-added products. So the coffee now comes in containers, shipped straight to Whole Food. You buy it in containers, and you're getting a percentage of that higher value. So if it's selling at $15 or $20 a particular container, why should you not be able to get $10 out of that, 50% to even 70%? Since you, and I don't know how the economics works in terms of the shipping costs, the tariffs, and all that other stuff. But it seems to me that this is actually a golden opportunity for African countries going forward. So while the economist sees it as a tragedy, I see it as a potential golden opportunity once and for all for African countries to really wean themselves off that dependency on exporting bulky, raw, and processed materials to the West and of course, to China as well.